The Death of Hermes, Chapter 2. Hermes ran. Already very ahead of his schedule, Hermes arrived at the Temple of Styx, ready to grant his blessing to his cousin Zagreus in his current escaped attempt. Attempt number 78. Not that he kept track, of course. Despite his busy schedule and all the places he had to be at, Hermes always made sure he would help Zagreus with his escape attempts, even if he was very well aware that his cousin never really actually wanted, or could, escape to Mount Olympus, instead seeking his mother. That knowledge, and Hermes' assistance to Zagreus were off the record, however. Hermes' relationship with his family was complicated, to say the least. But wasn't everything in Mount Olympus complicated, anyways? He was lucky that they were living in a relative time of peace between them, anyhow. Yet the messenger god worried sometimes. It was a gnawing feeling at his gut. Once Zagreus came to realize about Hermes' personal relationship with Charon, he unfortunately had to pretty much threaten him to not divulge said information. They were running a plan, and God forbid if anyone in Olympus found out. Well, that wouldn't be a problem, since Zagreus promised he would not say a thing. Hermes still felt bad about it, but he would make it up to his cousin once all of this blew over one way or another. He chatted as always with Charon as he waited for the prince to run by. Once he did, Zagreus welcomed him with a smile, lip already bloody from his fight with the champion of Elysium. "Ran over by the chariot, eh, cause?" Hermes asked, hands crossed behind his head as the prince made his selection for blessing. "And slammed by a minotaur." He picked his preferred blessing and smiled. "Occupational hazard." "See you later, cause. Good luck with your dad." Hermes waved him off, pretty content with himself when he saw Zagreus slip away towards the labyrinth. Obviously not as fast as him, but faster than he normally was. "Hey, guess what?" He turned his face to his partner, Charon, wrapping his arms around the Stygian boatman. "I'm pretty much done for the day. Ahead of schedule, once again. Am I not a hard worker?" Charon moaned, strong hand already wrapped around Hermes' back as well, in a hug. "Yeah, the hardest worker of them all. It's not even nighttime yet. What do you say I go back to Olympus to get a bottle of ambrosia and drink it in your little boat? Some night fishing?" Charon replied, puffs of smoke coming out of his mouth in approval. Hermes was basically a master in understanding Charon. He was not like Thanatos, who could understand his eldest brother just naturally. Hermes had to learn hard, but the closer they became, the easier it was to simply talk to Charon. "Okay then, we'll make a quick trip to Olympus then." He placed a kiss on Charon's cheek, gentle and chaste. Charon turned his face around, however, grabbing Hermes and giving him a deeper kiss. Charon's smoke tickled at the side of his cheeks, making him chuckle. "Behave! I'll be back in a few minutes. We can kiss all over then." Charon chuckled, letting go. Hermes waved him goodbye, zipping out of the temple. He made his way to Olympus quickly, the wings in his head and feet taking him far. He could feel the air bristling his feathers, leaving a blur of orange behind him. Mount Olympus was a massive structure, fit for the gods. His kin, except for Lord Hades, all resided at the mountain top, far above from all the mortals in their realm. It's where Hermes lived as well, but he rarely spent much time at home. Unlike his brothers and sisters, Hermes' job had him on the move constantly, in and out of Olympus constantly. He flew past the Golden Gates, and part of him felt bad that Zagreus would never be able to experience the mountains. Even if the young prince never really wanted to join the rest of his family, he never had an actual option, being tied to Hades' realm. He wished that he could at least have the choice. Olympus itself was a labyrinth, but unlike the Underworld, it never rearranged itself. Hades' realm was designed to change every aspect, accommodating for every shade that arrived. Olympus was a constant, however, rooms only being added if new residents came about. Zeus was already talking about giving Zagreus his own section in the building, something Hermes nor his siblings had for themselves. The hallways were decorated with paintings and statues of him and his family, but Zeus was the most represented in said depictions. It was funny to see how the mortals portrayed them all. None of the depictions were correct, but they were all so different from each other. It was amusing. He ran past the gardens, but stopped when he heard someone calling for him. "Lord Hermes." He stopped in his tracks, slightly skidding across the floor as he was called. "May I have a minute of your time?" He bit his lip, but quickly made his way outside. There were plenty of gardens in Olympus, this one being in one of many balconies. Lady Demeter stood there. her back facing Hermes and staring down at the clouds around the mountains. "Of course, Lady Demeter," he greeted cheerily, stepping inside the balcony and already feeling his skin chill with the goddess cold. "Lovely day we're having, eh?" They rarely spoke to each other apart from the occasional greeting. Hermes was aware that Demeter didn't have much high opinion of him, but now she rarely had any high opinion in regards to anyone. She had taken an interest in helping Zacharias with his escape attempts lately, however, something uncharacteristic of her. The flowers all around her were already frozen over, and Hermes was afraid his wings would freeze if he stopped beating them. As fashionable as it was, his scarf did not provide much heat against her bitter cold. Lady Demeter held softly onto the railing, staring into the horizon. He did not float up to her level, as he knew she disliked that, instead standing next to her, staring at the clouds. She was far much larger than him. He only reached up to her hip. She waited for a few moments before she spoke, still not facing her nephew. "Tell me, Lord Hermes," she sighed, staring down at him. She looked exhausted. "You travel through all the land, don't you?" "Oh, yes, Lady Demeter, pretty much every day," he replied quickly, staring up at her. He felt so small in her presence. "Tell me, you haven't seen her, have you?" But pardon me?" "My daughter, Kore. Lord Hermes, have you seen her in your travels? Have you found my Kore?" Hermes felt a knot in the bottom of his stomach. He didn't break eye contact with her, but the winged god felt his legs begging him to run. "I am sorry, Lady Demeter," he shook his head gently. "I have not seen her. If I had, you would be the first to know." "I see," she sighed, face full of resignation. She stared back at the horizon. "You bring souls to the underworld, don't you?" "Yes, Lady Demeter. It is one of my many duties." "You have not taken her to the underworld, have you?" Hermes froze. His blood chilled and he thought he was about to vomit. "Taken her to the underworld?" "Her father was a mortal, a farm boy. Mortals are such fragile things, Lord Hermes. I do not advise you falling in love with them." She gripped the railing. Hermes could feel the temperature lower drastically around him. "He is now gone, taken to the underworld, as all mortals eventually are. But I've never thought, if she does perish, would she join her father in Hades' realm? Would you be taking her to him?" Hermes was still. Frost started to spread over his clothes. "I have lost all hope of finding her. I thought that maybe—" "I have not taken her to the underworld, Lady Demeter. If I had, I would tell you immediately." He did not know if his skin was going cold was due to Demeter or his own anxiety. His wings started to frost over painfully, the ice prickling at his skin as he remained still, staring up at Demeter. The goddess stilled, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. Hermes still felt like he was in the jaw of oblivion as he waited for her reaction. "Thank you, Lord Hermes. If you do ever find her—" "I swear, if I ever find Kore, I will bring her to you, Lady Demeter." "Very well. You can leave now. Goodbye." "Goodbye, Lady Demeter." He forced himself to move, crackling at the thin layer of ice that had formed on his skin. He didn't run, instead walking quickly out of the balcony. Hermes' heartbeat skyrocketed, heart beating hard against his ribcage. Horror, relief, and guilt all mixed in his gut as he power-walked towards his room, wings still chilly from the encounter. If Demeter ever came to find out that he knows her daughter's whereabouts, what if she chopped him up in little pieces and scattered him all across Tartarus, just like she had done to her parents? What if he had to roll a boulder up a cliff during all eternity, like Sisyphus? She didn't seem to suspect Hermes of any tomfoolery, however. Hermes technically did tell her the truth. He had not seen Kore in the land of the living, and he had not taken her to the underworld. Though he felt Lady Demeter would not be happy to learn that Hermes knew her dear daughter had been in the underworld after all this time. He swallowed spit, his mood definitely soured from the interaction. He would have to talk to Charon about this. If Lady Demeter was to learn about their involvement, Hermes didn't even want to think about what she would do to them. She had, after all, threatened the Stygian boatman with freezing the Styx. He slipped inside his room quietly. It was always in disarray, even if he barely spent any time there nowadays. Like Charon, he also enjoyed having expensive things in his room, but it was nothing comparable to the massive hoard the ferryman had. Still, his room was decorated with expensive bolts of fabric, golden trinkets, and paintings the mortal made of his image, or at least what they believed he looked like. Hermes took a deep breath, slightly tapping his cheek with his palms in an attempt to calm down. Everything would be okay. He was the god of trickery. He was very well used to tricking people and outright lying. He definitely would talk to Charon about this. but it didn't actually seem like Demeter was suspecting him. She just seemed resigned. He did not know what was worse. Jumping around in an attempt to relieve his anxiety, he quickly dug around one of his cabinets, taking the last bottle of ambrosia. He would have to get more from Dionysus later. He stashed the bottle inside his satchel and decided it was time to go. He didn't want to spend much time in Mount Olympus at the moment. His anxiety was still too high. He couldn't have spent more than 10 minutes in his room. It was already dark out when he entered the hallway, jumping in place as he prepared himself to go back to the Temple of Styx, back to his lover. Just before he started running, however, an echoing voice boomed from deep inside Olympus. "Lord Hermes," the voice called, terrifyingly familiar. It made his blood run cold. "Do you have a moment?" Hermes continued to hold on to Charon's robe, gasping for air. He could hear the whispers of the shades all around him, but he didn't care. Let them stare. Charon held him gently, letting him come back to reality. "Lord Hermes." He recognized Lord Hades' voice beside them. "I'm fine, he choked out, still unable to finish a sentence. The pain was finally dying down, and with that, his panic. He let go of Charon's robes and tried to sit up. "I'm fine. I'm all right." Charon helped him as he attempted to stand up, but his knees were still weak. He instead opted to sit down on the chairs that led to the pool right next to the boatman. Charon placed his hand on his shoulder, soothing and grounding. "Lord Hermes, what happened? Are you all right?" He recognized Persephone's voice, and Hermes started to feel overwhelmed. "Queen Persephone, He smiled weakly. His breathing was still difficult. "Just give me a second. I'm trying to collect myself." The queen just nodded, staring at him worriedly. His uncle turned around, shooing all the shades that had gathered around. "Move, there is nothing to see here. Out with you. Move along." He appreciated it, as Hermes didn't really want all those eyes on him at the moment. He felt far too vulnerable, but Charon's hands were soothing to him, reaffirming. He turned to face the boatman, and he looked very distressed, but Hermes could tell he was trying his hardest to be comforting to the winged god. Hermes took a deep breath, ready to get up. He stood up, ever so helpful Charon helping him in case he fell. He still felt strange, as if his body was just getting used to being alive once more. He had no idea how much time had passed since he died. Did Zagreus feel this every time he died? This was Hermes' first time dying, and it was outright miserable. He suddenly had gained newfound respect for the prince, considering he had died almost 100 times now. He stood up to his full height. He didn't fly, instead standing on the tiled floor. Hermes had been in the house of Hades before, but he had arrived in less fatal ways. There were far more decorations the last time he had visited, however. Courtesy from Zagreus, according to Charon. Persephone went to his side, still worried about him. "Are you okay?" "Forgive me, Queen. I must admit this is my first time I died." He smiled weakly, brow still furrowed. "I am not used to the feeling." His attempt at light-hearted humor did not help calm Lady Persephone down, however, concern painting her face. "Did something happen? Is everyone in Olympus okay?" Hermes felt vile in his mouth when Persephone mentioned Olympus. He couldn't help himself but scowl, but he quickly replaced it with a fake smile. Yes, he chuckled. Oh, wow, that is weird." Hypnos stared at him, not moving from his spot. Hypnos was Charon's younger brother and Thanatos' twin, which surprised Hermes, since he looked nothing like the psychopomp. He hadn't had a chance to talk with the chthonic god since their line of work didn't really mix up. He couldn't remember if he had met him prior to this. He remembered seeing Hypnos sleeping during Hermes' previous visits, and the god looked like he was on the verge of falling asleep at the very moment. God of sleep, all right. Never seen another god that wasn't Zagreus or Lord Hades come out of the pool. Charon hissed out in annoyance, telling Hypnos to leave Hermes be. "I'm sorry, I am just surprised. Well, welcome to the house of Hades." Before Hermes could say anything, Uncle Hades was already staring down at him, slightly touched, slightly slouched. He was just as tall as Lady Demeter, casting a looming shadow over him, and yet he did not instill the fear Lady Demeter or Hades' other siblings instilled. His face was stern and tired, but he seemed worried. This was the first time one of Zeus's children arrives at the house in this manner.
Now, Lord Hermes, is there any specific reason you're here?
Hades, he died, Lady Persephone interjected. You can't interrogate him like it is his fault.
The Olympian sighed, and Hermes felt a hint of panic. His teeth clenched as he was reminded of the horrible, exhausting arguments Zeus and Hera would constantly have in Olympus. He didn't want that to happen. He didn't want Zachary's parents to start fighting and...
It's... Do not worry, it is all right. Hermes waved them off, jumping off the ground and floating in the air as if everything was all right. Charon let go of him, simply staring at the little god whose wings fluttered quickly. This is really embarrassing, Lord Uncle Hades, but, well, he scratched the back of his neck anxiously. I did in fact die. First time ever, and I must admit, the experience is horrible, and now I can assure you it will never happen again. How did it happen? Asked Persephone, hand in her mouth. She looked so much like Lady Demeter. A bear. Everyone stared at him quietly. I did say it was really embarrassing. I just saw one of those bears, and, well, I must admit it felt a little bit too daring and tried to pet one, you know? Just wanted to know how it felt. Well, now I'm here.
Well, if that is so, then I sure hope you learned your lesson, as I do not tolerate the commotion you have caused in the house. Hades' face soured. However, there are matters I must discuss with you at this moment.
Lord Hades looked at Persephone, who looked back at Hades, her face frowning in a painful and exhausted expression. Hermes should not be here. They did not know the god of swiftness already knew about Hades and Persephone's marriage and her presence in the underworld, and Hermes just caught them in their lie. About what? He feigned ignorance, his smile starting to break. Do you not recognize me? Persephone asked, wide green eyes staring at him. You're the queen of the underworld. I've heard about you from the shades. Yeah. He could tell his lies were not convincing them anymore. Persephone looked down at the floor in defeat, as Hades took a deep breath. The pain in his chest reappeared slightly, mixing with the knot in his throat. Hermes felt sweat roll down his face. I don't know what is going on, Uncle Hades. I don't understand what's happening. Why all the sour faces?
You don't seem to understand the situation we are all currently in, nephew.
Hades' voice was terrifying. It made Hermes' wing twitch in fear, even if he himself tried his hardest to pretend ignorance.
We must discuss this in a more private matter, and come with a good solution.
Hermes ran. The god could hear shouting behind him, but he did not stop. Panic had already settled in, and he did the only thing he was good for. He ran as fast as he could, exiting the house and deep into Tartarus. He knew that he wouldn't be able to escape to the surface, but he didn't know if he wanted to reach the surface ever again. His body commanded him, running as fast as he could to nowhere, running from everything and yet from nothing. The pain in his chest bloomed once more, hitching his breath and making him weak in the knees. But Hermes did not stop running, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. Hermes cursed loudly, screaming explicits, as he continued to run like he would die if he stopped. Every time he thought about Hades, he panicked. He could feel his chest ripping apart once more. He could feel the blood pouring out of him like a cascade. He could feel his life fading away as his body was nothing but pain. He feared Lord Hades ripping him apart. He tripped. Hermes skidded across the floor of Tartarus, crashing against a pillar. He rolled over, grasping at his chest as if it was open once more, even if he was physically fine. His knees were scrapped from the fall, but that was nothing compared to the pain in his ribcage. He placed his hands on his face, arching his back up to the sky. He ran his fingers down his hair, rustling his feathers and the golden laurels. Hermes took a deep breath, falling limply to the ground as he felt everything come apart around him.